Learn to be super successful. Subscribe to my channel, Meathead. That was the beginning of foreplay, I guess, when you carried the books, as opposed to me snapping their trainer bras. I never carried anybody's books. I had some women carry my books. I'm a member of the AARP, which is the retirement something or other, since I'm 55 years old. So I've been a senior citizen for more than 20 years. And I look at these magazines once in a while for some ideas. But if the normal person that turns 55 has been inundated with what they should be doing in their senior years, just as you've been inundated what you can be doing in your junior years. I just looked at an e-commercial ad where a long-haired freak, he didn't have tattoos, he had earrings, but he had hair about down to here, and he was saying how if you think this is the way that you should make money on Amazon, some bullshit, that you can make up to 10 grand a month doing something. Okay. When you're 15 years old, 10 grand a month may be a lot of money. But when you're an adult, it shouldn't be. But because you've been inundated with stuff like this since you're 10, 12, 15, 30, 20, 30 years old, your framework for what's a lot of money and what's not a lot of money is different. Just as I can't relate to a lot of the things that, not just questions you ask, but your thought process, because I've never thought that way, even when I was poor. But we're inundated, and now information is almost instantaneous. Arguably, it is instantaneous. You just, but I listen to Al Jazeera. I listen to Bloomberg or Watch. I watch and listen to BBC. I watch and listen very seldom, but even to CNN. I watch and listen to European news stations. So I get a different flavor, especially Al Jazeera, which is a Middle Eastern-owned TV station here in Europe. And so my framework of information is different as when I predicted the oil going to negative. It was based on thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of meetings, phone calls, faxes in the old days, more recently Zoom calls. And because I know OPEC is a worthless cunt, the governing body of the people that are supposed to control the production of oil, I know that not everybody cheats on the production of oil, but certainly almost all Middle Eastern, South American, Russians, oil producers cheat. So I know that. And you never hear that OPEC cheats on TV. Once in a while, you hear that Iran, who's not supposed to sell oil, has upped their production 600,000 barrels a day. Well, fuck, they're not supposed to sell oil for 25 years. And they're talking about them up in production. Nobody's supposed to be buying oil. That's supposed to be blood oil, blood money. And of course, they've been sanctioned for 25 or plus years. So when you factor all that information in, and again, there's no algorithm for 50 years experience and a gazillion decisions, and then you get this long-haired geek says $10,000 a day you can make. $10,000 a month, not a day. At first, I thought it was a day. So that's why I started listening to it. Well, fuck, what can you do for 10 grand a day? And then, okay. So we're a product of our social and economic media, meaning we're a product of our environment. And a great deal of our environment today is, I used to be saying the cloud before there was a cloud, and I didn't know. And then when the cloud came, what I was saying, I was being facetious, like you're dreaming. We're going to talk about goals now and dreaming. So I said, in the cloud. So now we got a fucking cloud, so I have to differentiate. And so that's why you think a lot of money is a lot of money. Now, almost everybody that has a million knows a million's not worth like it used to be. Okay? We know that. And I'm going to tell you a story about a guy that, if I was going to pick a guy, I don't want to name his name on YouTube, that was not going to make it. Took him from June 2020. Yeah. And I'll read about it. And We did a deal, 2-point-some million dollars. And so now he's a millionaire, which doesn't really mean dick, but for this guy, it's like being a trillionaire, you know. And a few of you in here, even though you may not want to admit it, because you framed your life in a certain way, that, and again, making you look or sound better than you are. You know, when I ask you questions, do your kids think you're successful? Most of you, well, either my kids are too little, meaning they don't know because they're too little. I assume that's what the rest of the answer was, although you didn't write it that way. Or I don't know, but you really do know, but you're not saying. Or a couple of you said, well, they get anything they want. Well, when you're 7 years old, you don't want much, do you? So what kind of fucking answers are those? So you're skirting the issue. The real question is, do you think they think by your actions you're successful? It's like the preacher's son said, Daddy, I guess God doesn't pay too well because everybody else has got a bigger house. The kids know. The kids know. You may not want them to believe that they know, but getting back to the framework of 10 grand a month, most of you come from an environment that 6-figure income is okay. I have a mentee, unfortunately, from New Zealand, who was one at the forefront of 25 years ago of the internet and telco, et cetera. And 6 or 8 years ago, Sally and I happened to be there. We had lunch with him. And he said that 10 grand a month, a Beamer, which I guess means a BMW, and a house in the country is success in New Zealand and Australia. It's about 10 years ago. Okay. And so you've been inundated with this information most of your lives. And the good news is a good portion of my adulthood, there was no internet. The good news is a good portion of my adulthood, and I poke fun of myself getting online on April 1st, 2000, when I didn't know what the mouse was. But you can't blame that because there are people your age, and the average age in here is 37. The last seminar, the average age was 33, but it's normally between early 30s to late 30s is the average age of the kids that come to the seminar. A lot of kids did something about it. We've had kids here that are very successful, that are up on the Hall of Fame, that don't have TVs, that don't listen to the radio. How is that possible? Because their parents didn't have TVs. In some cases, because they were evangelists and they thought it was a message of God coming across the screen. A lot of truth in that. And the message of the devil coming across the screen. A lot of truth in that. So they didn't allow their kids to watch TV. Now, just imagine if you hadn't been allowed to watch TV, or the TV that you watched was selective. I know it's hard to control kids on the internet because they see all kind of shit, a lot of bad stuff, okay? But there are parents that go out of their way. They get locking tools or whatever, so you know what the people are doing. But your parents didn't do that, did they? Mm-mm. Did they do it because they didn't care about you? Did they do that because they're just fucking stupid? I would lean towards that end. Or did they not do it because they were just lazy and you were an accident? Whatever way, whatever the rationale of the reasoning, it could have been different. The Williams sisters from Torrance, California, right down, we lived in Palos Verdes on the hill, and they were grown up. In the movie, Will Smith just got an Academy Award for playing the father. Were trained since they were born to be high-performance people. Tiger Woods who's from Torrance, California. I don't think that's a coincidence, who played on the golf courses there in Torrance in the Long Beach area, was trained since he's 2 or 3 years old to be a high-performance person. And what did they do for you? Nothing. And in some cases, the nothing not only didn't have a positive effect, it had a negative effect. Because down deep inside, like the kid, the son of the preacher, why is our house smaller? Now, some of you lived in neighborhoods, bless you, where all the houses were the same size. Some of you, for those of you that might have been a little better off, you lived in what I call a 3,000 square foot house in a 1,000 square foot neighborhood. Okay? But more likely, you were the 1,000 square foot house and not the 3,000 square foot house. None of the houses in my neighborhood had 1,000 square feet. It was in the hundreds of square feet. So again, when we talk about goals and affirmations after we get off YouTube, you will be going forward when you leave here in a couple of days, the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. For those of you that are 30 years old, you've been around about 240,000 hours. You can make up for those 240,000 hours. And if you're 60 years old or thereabouts, it's roughly double. So you've been around about 500,000 hours. You can transform that social and economic background that you've been raised within in 50 hours here, roughly speaking, not counting the homework, et cetera, et cetera. But you've got to put the plan in action. You've got to put the plan in action. We're going to talk about not only Balmer today, and we're going to talk about the old man from the night before last homework. But both of those people, one didn't know anything about tennis, and one didn't know anything about computers. And all you want to know is the why. You want to know how it works. You want to know how it's put together. And as I've said ad nauseum for 3 days, you use that as procrastination, and it gives you more time to not do anything. Whereas people like me and the people that you've seen just pull the trigger, even if it's wrong. Do not confuse me with the facts. I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt. And again, these people are the flavor of the day, dating back 100 years. And you want to be like them, but you either on purpose or by accident don't want to know how they don't want to know how they did it. And in all cases, they were pretty tough. Balmer was ruthless in sales, but to the best of my knowledge, Steve didn't kill anybody. When we spend all of our time thinking about QLA, when we immerse ourselves in QLA, as you heard the Goomba brothers, they listen to the tapes, they get fired up, and they set their clock every morning, and they set their children's clock every morning, as we witnessed 2 seminars ago with the Leanne and Graham Carling. They brought their 14-year-old son who's been listening to my stuff, QLA stuff, since he's 8 or 9 years old. Remember, self-esteem is built the first 7 or 8 years. For those of you that have kids older than 7 or 8, unless they're really immature, like I was at 7 or 8, they're through. No matter what you're going to do to them, you can't change them. The stone is set. If you have teenagers, this is a harsh thing to say, don't waste your fucking time. You're only going to be frustrated. And you're only going to move their clock marginally. Now, some would say, well, Mr. Peña, isn't a marginal shift better than no shift? I don't think so. You can't be all you can be with a marginal shift. QLA and all you can be takes total shift. And the kids are past it. The kids are past it. Any comments about Steve Ballmer in the movie? Yes, sir.
He was very enthusiastic.
Just like you. I mean, it's like a kindred spirit, isn't it? I can just feel the enthusiasm reeking off your fat body. Yeah. Speaking of enthusiasm, you should roll up funeral parlors.
Is about one funny trick? Don't be a one funny trick.
That's an excellent point. I don't care if you're only a one-trick pony. I hope to God that you're a one-trick pony. I don't give a shit if you're a two-trick pony. But when these icons get into that space, there's a lot of one-trick ponies around. I mean, you don't know them, but there's a lot of. Most people that are successful, super successful, iconic, only have one idea. They got rich off of it, and they ride the poor horse until its legs fall off. Okay. From my lips to the big man's ears, I hope you have that. But once you have that, you want more. Because they only put you on the front page of Forbes for so long on one trick. They only write about you in the Wall Street Journal for so long on one trick. And so they try to be 2 and 3 and 4 trick ponies. Arguably, Apple has had 2 or 3 trick ponies, maybe even more. Actually, Apple has had more trick ponies under Cook than he did under Jobs. Okay. Cook is an icon that doesn't have the same kind of reputation as Steve, because Steve was first. And when we talk about your ideas, if you can't be first, you have to be different. And most of the models in this room that you have, you're just copying somebody. You haven't added any value whatsoever. Just like you're not going to add any value to your board. You've just copied somebody on the internet. Or you've copied somebody that has a shop down the street. You haven't added anything. So the icons want to be more than one trick. And Steve has cajoled himself into saying that under his leadership, they were a 2 and arguably a 3 trick pony. I don't know enough about that, but I also know some of the Microsoft shit didn't work. So, everybody forgets that, but the public forgets it too. The public forgets it. You made mistakes because you're only as good as your last prize fight. You're only as good as your last horse race, and you either won the horse race or you didn't win the horse race. Anything else about Steve? Okay, the old man who never played tennis, 187 world champions. It's obvious his is a mind game. It's obvious the way he played Agassi against Boris Becker, yada, yada, yada. Okay. It's obvious. Even at Little League sports or junior high school sports or high school sports, it's a mind game. The coach is trying to convince the kid, 15, 16 years old, who just entered puberty a year or two before, that they can be star athletes. And sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not successful. But it's a mind game because most young kids don't believe in themselves. Why? Because they see their parents and there's no benchmark. If they have parents, a lot of the kids being raised now, especially in the ghettos in the barrio, don't have that parental role model, okay? And a good parental role model. They may have a role model, but it's just shit, you know? But I mean, he exudes all the major benchmarks of QLA. He doesn't want to be liked. He wants to be effective. He doesn't give a shit what you think of him. All these things that you've attempted during most of your adult life to be the icons and exemplified with the tennis guy, they don't want to be. It's like the article I read, or the headline of the article I read to you, why high-performance people don't want to be liked. Now, the high-performance people that I know have known that all their lives. And now Inc. magazine and its infinite wisdom, and I applaud Inc. magazine for doing it, but they're only about 50 years late. I'm positive most of you in this room are not training, that's the wrong word, raising your kids to be liked. I'm absolutely positive. I don't have to ask you. And look how you turned out. Yes, you're in the back.
One of my takeaways from Nick was there was no why in his thinking, and I couldn't understand it at first. Like, it's he's rolling, he's doing things, and he doesn't seem to think about anything.
The operative word is think. You overthink because you're afraid of making a mistake. Some of you will blame your overthinking or your paralysis by analysis because you don't want to lose the money. That's not the real reason. Even for the cheapest fuck in this room. The real reason is you don't want to be embarrassed. Because if you have any self-worth or self-esteem, it's onion layer thin. And it's easily punctured. Like, I was always told when raising little girls are harder than raising little boys because they're more sensitive, and that's what you say. And back in the old days, women weren't allowed to do certain things because they were just women, and they were supposed to be physically weaker, yada, yada. All that's been disproven. But we raised our daughter not like that. I reminded our daughter, who was here a couple weeks ago, that when she was in the second or third grade, she broke the shin of her headmistress of a big expensive school. She did karate, she did a spin, something or other, and cracked the poor woman's shin. Because there was a right way and wrong way and Kelly's way. That's our daughter's name. She's softened up a little. But we taught them just the opposite. Now, you may have been taught, don't start fights, but defend yourself. Now, kids aren't taught to defend themselves. They're taught to walk away now. And ours, it wasn't. We weren't taught to walk away. If you walked away, you're a cunt. And a coward label will stick with you the rest of your life. Turn the other cheek and all that shit like it's in the, okay. But then it was, don't start the fight, but make sure you end the fight. Okay. That's more or less. We taught our kids, better that their brains are coming out of their skull when you leave them. You're not just there to make a point. You're there to fracture bones. And when we went around the grammar school, Kelly with Sally, and I busted a guy's arm there in 7 places, and I put a kid's eye out here. It was like Disneyland to me back when I was a kid. And of course, then the headmaster, the teacher, every time I told him I did something here, he just looked at me like I was, a monster that was about to give him money. But he didn't know I was going to give him money when he showed me around the campus. Okay. But that's, and I was at the aggressive end of the school kids. But what else about Nick? Yes, sir.
He didn't attach himself with his kids, no feelings. He just dropped them like shit.
I don't need any justification. Nobody has coached a fraction of the world champions that he has. Not even remotely close. And I called him a few years ago. I tried to get him here. I know he's 88 or 90 now, but when I called him, he was about 84, 85. And he got bored talking with me, and he handed the phone off to his assistant. And of course, a different voice. Who the fuck's this? I'm so-and-so. I'm Mr. Nick's assistant. And then he tried to get me at the U.S. Open, a tennis open, to do not a lecture, but some sort of talk. And it wasn't. I couldn't fit it in my schedule. But it's like when we asked at the end of the seminar that woman who said that she had more characteristics like Steve Jobs, and I wanted to choke her, that little Vietnamese Dutch gal. I mean, how many of, don't answer me, just in your own mind, how many of Nick's characteristics, if any, do you have? Probably none. Other than if you call wanting to be successful a trait, most of the people in this room want to be successful. We will ascertain over time whether you're willing to make the sacrifices commensurate with that success. But, and I'm not saying 8 wives or whatever, he has 7 or 8 ex-wives who, if I remember correctly, he couldn't remember the names. That's not that unusual when you want to block out part of your life that was a mistake. So I can kind of relate to that. But I mean, a lot of the traits he has, Steve Jobs had, Bill Gates has. But again, and I've said this, until I'm sick, that people want the success that's attributed with these iconic men and women, but they don't ever relate to or mention the sacrifices they made. Well, anything else about Nick or Ballmer? Yes, sir.
Nick, he gave away his product for free. There was no charge, and he gave away scholarships. So that was awesome.
Well, I'm the only guy that I know of that gives away all his product free. Okay? I'm not saying they don't give college scholarships like I do, Sally and I do, but I don't know anybody that does. Now, we had a Nick trainee here about 6 or 7 years ago from the tennis school. He was, I believe, if I remember correctly, he's from Argentina. He was the best youth golfer in South America. And he went to the Florida school when he was about 11 or 12. And he didn't make it through to the very, very top. If I remember correctly, he was in the Agassi era at the school. That's a tough time to be at the school when you're competing against Agassi. And now he owns pet grooming and pet schools, which is another good roll-up because of the big margins. You send your dogs and shit to be trained. And he couldn't, when we were talking about it, he was sobbing, he had to get up and because he was scarred for life, having gone through that training for 4.5 years. But he was successful. Then finally, the story, as I recall, finally his parents pulled him out. They should have let him stay, but anyway, they pulled him out because when he went home for 2 weeks a year, they saw a very confident guy, but mentally scarred. And a lot of the guys and gals that are super successful are mentally scarred. If you don't think Steve Jobs is mentally scarred, you're crazy. If you don't think Bill Gates is mentally scarred, you're crazy. If you don't think Zuckerberg is mentally scarred, you're crazy. But when you got $80 billion, they overlook the scar tissue. And in some cases, not all cases, they're willing to pay that price. How many times do you read about a super successful guy walks away and is never heard of again? He's had enough. We've had a few come to the seminar. We've still got one guy and gal that have been sailing 23 years now. They sail around, and that's all they do. They got a lot of money, but they both had super, super, super successful. If I mentioned her name, she's iconic, you would know her name. You wouldn't know his name. And they had enough. They had enough. And when they go into Fiji, now they know who they are. When they go into San Diego, nobody knows them. They sail into San Diego. When they sail into Anchorage, Alaska, nobody knows them. When they sail out, and that's just the way they like it. Anything else about Steve and Nick. Okay, YouTube, thank you.